The consortium of interstellar media had existed for 12,000 years. It was the oldest entertainment company in the known galaxy, and it had a very big problem. Across 17 star systems, nobody was watching anymore. Sat in her small office on the consortium's headquarters station, staring at the latest viewership reports. Her iridescent scales shifted from blue to gray, which happened whenever she felt worried. Her eye stalks drooped toward the holographic display, and she let out a long, tired breath. The numbers were bad. They had been bad for centuries, but now they were worse than ever. Her own species had grown bored of light symphonies. These were beautiful performances where artists would bend light itself into patterns and colors that danced across the sky. For 10,000 years, they had gathered in massive stadiums to watch these displays. Now, the stadium sat empty. Young said the light symphonies were old and boring. They said they had seen every pattern a million times before. The crystalline were even worse. They were beings made of living crystal, and they experienced entertainment through vibration. Frequency concerts had been their great art form, where musicians would create sounds that made every in the audience resonate in harmony. It was supposed to be the most beautiful feeling in the universe, but they had stopped attending. They said they could no longer feel anything new. Even the gas giant dwellers of Nimbus Prime, beings of living cloud who danced through storms, had grown quiet. Their atmospheric ballets, where thousands of them would swirl together in patterns across the sky, had once been famous across the galaxy. Now, fewer and fewer participated each year. Closed the report and rubbed her eye stalks with her primary hands. She was a mid-level entertainment executive, which meant she was important enough to worry about these problems but not important enough to fix them. Her job was to find new content, new ideas, new anything that might make the galaxy excited again. She had been failing at this job for 40 years. Her communication device buzzed. It was her supervisor, a large named Morel who had held his position for 300 years and seemed to enjoy making younger employees miserable. His voice crackled through the speaker. Survey Ship 7 just returned from the Outer Rim. They found another primitive species. Go process the data. Sighed, primitive species were never interesting. They always had simple art forms that seemed charming for about 5 minutes before everyone got bored. She had processed hundreds of these reports, and they were always the same. But she had nothing better to do, so she walked to the data processing center. The survey ship had found a small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system. The planet was called Earth by its inhabitants, who called themselves humans. They were soft, fleshy creatures with only 2 eyes and no scales at all. They had been broadcasting electromagnetic signals into space for less than 200 years, which made them extremely young by galactic standards. Began reviewing the intercepted broadcasts. The survey ship had collected thousands of hours of content, which the translation software had already processed. She expected to find simple stories, basic music, and primitive visual displays. She did not expect what she actually found. The first thing she noticed was something called a birthday party. The survey data showed humans gathering together to celebrate the anniversary of a single individual's birth. They would place a food item called cake on a table and insert small burning sticks into it. Then they would sing a song together, badly and out of tune, and the individual would extinguish the flames by blowing air at them. Stared at the footage. She did not understand what she was seeing. The humans seemed genuinely happy. They were making noise, embracing each other, and displaying what the translation software identified as joy over a burning pastry for a single person who had done nothing except continue to exist for another year. She kept watching. There were other gatherings too, something called a wedding reception, where 2 humans would declare their intention to remain together, and then everyone would eat food and dance in poorly coordinated movements. Something called a sporting event, where humans would gather in massive numbers to watch other humans compete at physical tasks, and they would shout and cheer with tremendous intensity, even though most of them had no personal connection to the competitors. There was something called a holiday party, where humans would decorate their dwellings with colored lights and exchange physical objects wrapped in decorative paper. There was something called a New Year celebration, where humans would gather at a specific moment in their planet's rotation and count numbers in descending order, then make loud noises and embrace each other when they reached zero. Watched for hours. She forgot to eat. She forgot to sleep. She watched humans gather to celebrate graduations, promotions, retirements, and achievements of every kind. She watched them gather to mourn losses, to support each other through difficulties, to simply spend time together for no reason at all. And slowly, she began to understand. The consortium had been creating entertainment for 12,000 years. They had perfected every art form in the galaxy. Their light symphonies were technically flawless. Their frequency concerts were mathematically optimal. Their atmospheric ballets followed patterns that had been refined over centuries. But somewhere along the way, they had forgotten something. The humans had not forgotten. Their celebrations were messy and imperfect. Their singing was terrible. Their dancing was uncoordinated. Their decorations were often ugly. Nothing about their gatherings was optimized or refined. But they were genuinely happy. They were truly together. They were experiencing something that the ancient civilizations of the galaxy had lost so long ago that they could not even remember losing it. Watched a human birthday party one more time. She watched the small child blow out the candles on the cake. She watched the family cheer and clap. She watched them embrace each other, laughing and crying at the same time. She felt something strange in her chest. Her scales shifted to a color she had never seen before. She wanted that. She wanted to feel what those humans were feeling. She suspected that everyone in the galaxy wanted to feel it too, even if they had forgotten that such a feeling existed. She began writing her report with trembling hands. 3 days later, stood before the consortium's board of directors. These were the oldest and most powerful beings in interstellar entertainment. Some of them had been alive for thousands of years. They stared at her with expressions of boredom and impatience. "A primitive species," said the chairman, an ancient whose scales had faded to pale silver. "You have interrupted our meeting for a primitive species." "Yes," said, her voice was shaking, but she did not stop. "They have something we need." She showed them the footage. She showed them the birthday parties and the weddings and the holiday celebrations. She showed them humans gathering in living rooms and stadiums and public squares, coming together for reasons that made no logical sense, experiencing joy that could not be. The board watched in silence. When the footage ended, nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, the chairman leaned forward. His old eyes had a strange light in them, something that had not been there for a very long time. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked. Took a deep breath. "I am proposing that we send a delegation to Earth. I am proposing that we negotiate licensing rights for human celebration formats. I am proposing that we bring their traditions to every world in the galaxy." The board members looked at each other. Some of them seemed confused. Others seemed skeptical. But a few of them, the oldest ones who could still remember what joy had felt like before they forgot, seemed to understand. "This is unprecedented," said the chairman. "Yes," said it is. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. The consortium would send a delegation to Earth. They would make contact with the humans. They would ask permission to license their celebration formats. And who had spent 40 years failing to find anything new, would lead the mission. She left the boardroom feeling something she had not felt in decades. It took her a while to remember the word for it. Hope. She was feeling hope. Somewhere in the galaxy, on a small blue planet, a child was blowing out birthday candles. The child did not know that anyone was watching. The child did not know that the simple act of celebrating another year of life was about to change the universe. The child just made a wish, smiled, and ate some cake. Ambassador Wei had been working in interstellar diplomacy for 15 years. She had handled first contact with a species of telepathic beings who communicated through shared dreams. She had negotiated trade agreements with who had 17 different concepts of ownership, and none of them matched anything humans understood. She had even helped mediate a territorial dispute between the silicon-based life forms of B and the methane breathers of the outer asteroid belt. Nothing had prepared her for this meeting. She sat in a conference room at the United Nations headquarters in Geneva, staring at a holographic contract that floated in the air between her and the alien delegation. The contract was written in 300 languages, including 12 that had never been seen on Earth before, and it detailed terms and conditions that made absolutely no sense to her. "You want to license birthday parties," she said slowly. The leader of the alien delegation nodded her head in the way she had learned was a human gesture of agreement. Her iridescent scales shimmered in the conference room lighting. "Yes," said, "and the New Year countdown, and the sporting tailgate, and the wedding reception." She consulted the notes on her data pad. "Also something called a gender reveal, though our legal team has concerns about the pyrotechnics." Ambassador pressed her hands against her eyes and tried to understand how her life had led to this moment. When the consortium ship had first appeared in Earth orbit 6 months ago, everyone had expected demands for resources, threats of invasion, or at least some kind of political power play. Instead, the aliens had asked to speak with whoever handled entertainment licensing. The governments of Earth had spent weeks trying to figure out if this was some kind of trick. Military analysts had looked for hidden weapons. Intelligence agencies had searched for ulterior motives. Conspiracy theorists had developed thousands of theories, each more creative than the last. But the aliens genuinely just wanted to license human parties. The negotiations had been going on for 3 months now, and Ambassador still could not quite believe any of it was real. "Let me make sure I understand," she said. "Your consortium controls entertainment for 17 star systems. You have been making art and music and performances for thousands of years, and you want to pay us for the right to throw birthday parties." "That is correct," said. "Why?" Scales shifted to a color that Ambassador had learned meant she was thinking carefully about how to explain something. The translator device handled the alien's words, but it could not fully convey the emotion behind them. "We have forgotten how to celebrate," said finally. "We have forgotten how to be happy together. We have perfected our art forms until there is no feeling left in them. Your species has something we lost long ago. We would like to learn it again." Ambassador leaned back in her chair. Across the table, her team of advisors exchanged glances. There were cultural anthropologists who had been brought in to help explain human traditions to the aliens. There were intellectual property lawyers who were still trying to figure out if you could trademark a concept across dimensional barriers. There were linguists, psychologists, and at least one philosopher who mostly just sat in the corner looking confused. "The challenge," said Doctor, the lead cultural anthropologist, "is that human celebrations are not just formats. They have meaning, context, history. You cannot simply copy the form and expect to get the same result." Stalks perked up with interest. "Please explain." Doctor pulled up a holographic display showing images of birthday celebrations from different human cultures. A birthday party is not just cake and candles. It is a recognition of individual existence within a community. It is an acknowledgement that time is passing and that the passage of time matters. The specific elements, the cake, the song, the gifts, these are symbols that carry emotional weight because of what they represent. "We understand symbols," said one of the other alien delegates, whose crystalline body hummed faintly with every word. "But we do not understand how the symbols create the feeling." "That is exactly the problem," said Doctor. The negotiations continued. Days turned into weeks. The alien delegation learned about the history of human celebrations. They studied the origins of birthday traditions in ancient cultures. They analyzed wedding ceremonies from every human society. They tried to understand why humans felt compelled to gather in large groups to watch other humans throw balls at each other. The humans, in turn, learned about the consortium's long history. They heard about the light symphonies that had once filled the with wonder. They learned about the frequency concerts that had made entire populations of vibrate in shared joy. They came to understand that these ancient civilizations had once known how to celebrate, but somewhere over the knowledge had been lost. Problems arose, many problems. They could not eat cake. Their digestive systems could not process earth ingredients. A team of human bakers began working with to develop plasma-based confections that could be ceremonially extinguished and would not poison anyone. The beings of Nimbus Prime lived in gas giant atmospheres where there was no concept of day or night. They had no word for midnight. How could they count down to a new year when they had no way to mark when the old year ended? They had no individual names in the human sense. How could they celebrate birthdays when they did not track individual existence the way humans did? Each problem required creative solutions. The negotiations grew more complex. More specialists were brought in. Subcommittees were formed. Position papers were written. But the biggest obstacle came from humans themselves. News of the negotiations had spread across Earth, and opinions were divided. Many people thought the whole thing was wonderful. The idea that human traditions could bring joy to alien civilizations seemed like a beautiful validation of everything that made humanity special. Others were not so happy. Religious leaders raised concerns about holidays with spiritual significance. Could aliens celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah or Diwali without understanding the deeper meaning behind these traditions? Would that be honoring the traditions or cheapening them? Cultural critics accused the consortium of appropriation on a cosmic scale. They said that human celebrations had been developed over thousands of years by specific communities with specific histories. Licensing them to alien corporations felt like a betrayal of that heritage. Politicians worried about the implications. If humans sold the rights to their traditions, what would happen to human cultural identity? What would it mean to be human if birthday parties were being thrown on distant planets by beings who had no understanding of Earth or its history? Protests appeared outside the UN building. Some signs said "Share the joy," and some signs said "Our traditions are not for sale." Ambassador found herself spending as much time negotiating with humans as she did with aliens. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, she sat in her office staring out the window at the lights of Geneva. Came to see her. The alien had learned to knock on doors, which Ambassador appreciated. "You seem troubled," said. "Many of my people do not want this to happen," said Ambassador. "They think we are giving away something precious." Considered this. Her scales shifted through several colors before settling on a soft blue-green. "May I share something with you?" she asked. Ambassador nodded. "When I first saw your people celebrating, I felt something I had not felt in many years. Your celebrations are imperfect. Your singing is not beautiful by any objective measure. Your dancing follows no optimal patterns, but there is something in them that we have lost, something alive." She paused, her eye stalks focused directly on the ambassador. "We are not trying to take your traditions. We are trying to learn from them. There is a difference." Ambassador was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "What if we trained your people? What if humans helped you understand not just the form of our celebrations, but the meaning behind them?" Scales lit up with a color Ambassador had not seen before. It was very bright. "That," said the alien, "would be acceptable." The compromise took another 2 months to negotiate. Human celebration facilitators would be trained and sent to alien worlds. They would teach not just how to throw a party, but why parties mattered. They would help alien species adapt human traditions to their own cultures while preserving the essential spirit of each celebration. It was not a perfect solution. Nothing ever was, but it was a beginning. When the final agreement was signed, both species gathered in the conference room, had insisted on one thing: there should be cake. A human baker had created a special cake that both species could eat. It had candles. Someone had written "Happy First Contact" in frosting that tasted different to humans and aliens but was sweet to both. They sang "Happy Birthday," even though it was not anyone's birthday. The aliens did not know the words, and the humans sang out of tune as usual. It did not matter. When the candles were blown out, everyone cheered. For just a moment, the conference room was not a place of politics and negotiations. It was just a room full of beings who were happy to be together. Ambassador looked at. The alien scales were cycling through every color of the rainbow. "How do you feel?" the ambassador asked. Considered the question carefully. "I feel," she said finally, "like this is just the beginning." 50 years had passed since the signing of the Celebration Accords, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one had predicted. On the methane moon of 442, a young named was getting ready for her birthday. She was turning 12 standard years old, which was still quite young by her species standards. Her scales shimmered with nervous excitement, shifting through shades of pink and gold that she could not quite control. Her family had gathered in their dwelling, a structure of curved metal and transparent panels that looked out over the methane lakes of their world. The sky above was a swirl of orange and brown clouds, and the distant sun cast long shadows across the frozen landscape. In the center of the main room, a plasma orb hovered above the table. It glowed with 12 small flames, each one a different color. This was the birthday candle, adapted for a species that could not eat cake and lived in an atmosphere where earth fire could not exist. Smother gestured for everyone to gather around. There were grandparents and cousins and friends from the neighborhood, all of them arranging themselves in a loose circle around the plasma orb. They began to sing. The song was not the human happy birthday song. It had been translated and adapted over the decades, changed to fit the language and musical tradition. The melody was different, the words were different, but the meaning was the same. "We celebrate you. We are glad you exist. We hope for more years of joy." Closed her eyes and concentrated. With a careful pulse of gravitational energy, something all could produce from their bodies, she reached out toward the plasma orb. The 12 flames flickered and danced. Then one by one, they went out. Everyone cheered. Hands and appendages reached out to touch her in the gesture of affection. Her grandmother, who was very old and remembered a time before human traditions had come to their world, was crying. But instead of just making a wish, did something her grandmother's generation had never done. She projected a holographic image into the communal memory bank. It was a picture of herself standing in a field of crystal flowers, smiling, happy. This was her hope for the coming year. By projecting it, she was sharing it with everyone who loved her. The tradition had evolved. They had taken the human concept and made it their own. A galaxy away, on a world made entirely of crystal formations, a wedding was taking place. The two beings who were joining their lives together stood at the center of a vast amphitheater carved from living quartz. Their crystalline bodies caught the light from 3 suns and scattered it in rainbows across the assembled guests. There were thousands of present, and thousands more watching through remote connection nodes. The ceremony had elements that would have been familiar to any human who had ever attended a wedding. There were vows, promises to remain together through difficulty and joy. There were witnesses who spoke about the character of those being joined. There was music that made the very walls of the amphitheater vibrate with harmony. But there was also something that humans did not do. At the climax of the ceremony, the two approached each other and touched. Where their crystalline bodies met, Cracks began to form. Slowly, carefully, they shattered each other. Gasps went through the crowd, but these were not gasps of horror. They were gasps of awe. The pieces of the two hung in the air, suspended by the focused will of the wedding officiants. Then slowly, the pieces began to recombine. Crystal fragments from one being merged with fragments from the other. When the process was complete, two new stood where the old ones had been. They were still individuals, still themselves, but each now contained a part of the other. This was the ceremonial shattering and reconstruction. It symbolized how love breaks us apart and remakes us stronger. The reception that followed was legendary even by standards. Their crystalline bodies could resonate with music in ways that no other species could match. When the dancing began, harmonic frequencies spread out from the amphitheater and could be felt across entire continents. Beings who were not even at the wedding could experience the joy of it through the vibrations that traveled through the crystal structures of their world. The human wedding tradition had been transformed into something entirely new, and somehow it was still recognizably a wedding. In the swirling storms of Nimbus Prime, the beings of Living Cloud were preparing for the biggest celebration of their year. New Year's Eve had been a challenge to adapt for the gas giant dwellers. They had no ground to stand on, no buildings to gather in, and no concept of midnight in their eternal twilight world. Human facilitators had worked for years with Nimbus philosophers to find a solution. They had created an artificial time marker. At a specific moment in the planet's orbit, synchronized with the galactic standard calendar, all of Nimbus Prime would celebrate together. As the moment approached, millions of cloud beings began to gather in the upper atmosphere. They swirled together in patterns that spanned thousands of kilometers, their bodies merging and separating in an endless dance. The humans had brought the concept of counting down, and the Nimbus beings had adapted it to their own style. They did not count with numbers, they counted with colors. The entire atmosphere began to shift. Reds faded to oranges, oranges to yellows, yellows to greens. Across the planet, every being was changing at the same time, following the same countdown, feeling the same anticipation. And then, at the moment of midnight, everything turned brilliant white. The flash was visible from space. Ships passing through the system could see Nimbus Prime light up like a second sun. And in that moment of blinding brightness, every being on the planet felt connected to every other being. They felt, for just an instant, like they were all part of something larger than themselves. Then the colors returned, swirling into new patterns, and the celebration continued for hours. On 17 worlds, in 17 different ways, the galaxy was learning to celebrate. But the most surprising changes were happening on Earth itself. Human children now grew up knowing that their birthday songs were sung on distant worlds. They knew that when they blew out candles, beings of crystal and cloud and living light were performing their own versions of the same ritual. The simple traditions that humans had practiced for centuries suddenly had a new meaning. We are not alone, we are part of something bigger. Schools began teaching galactic celebration history alongside human cultural studies. Children learned about the light symphonies that they had created before they forgot how to feel joy. They learned about the great silence that had spread across the consortium, the thousands of years when ancient civilizations had lost their ability to celebrate. And they learned that their own traditions, the messy, imperfect, wonderful traditions of humanity, had helped to heal that silence. It changed how humans saw themselves. For most of history, humans had felt small and insignificant in the vastness of space. Now they knew that they had given something precious to the galaxy. Not technology, not power, not wealth. Something more important. They had taught the galaxy how to be happy together. Came back to Earth one last time when she was very old. Her scales had faded to pale silver, like ancient paper. Her eye stalks no longer moved as quickly as they once had. She had retired from the consortium decades ago, and she had spent her remaining years traveling to different worlds, watching how human traditions had been transformed and adopted. She had seen birthday parties on worlds that humans had never visited. She had attended weddings that made her crystalline friends vibrate with joy. She had watched the New Year's flash from orbit around Nimbus Prime and felt the same wonder that the cloud beings felt. Now she wanted to see where it all began. Ambassador Wei was retired too, living in a small house in the Swiss countryside. She was surprised when contacted her, but she immediately invited the alien to visit. They sat together on the porch, looking out at the mountains. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "Do you remember the first time I showed you a birthday party?" asked. "I remember you were very confused," said Wei. "I was not confused, I was overwhelmed." Scales shifted to the bright color that meant strong emotion. "I had forgotten what it felt like to want something. Your celebrations reminded me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then asked if she could see one more birthday party before she died. Just a simple one, nothing elaborate. It turned out that Wei's great-granddaughter was turning 7 that week. The family had been planning a small celebration at the house. The party was exactly what it hoped for. There were children running around making noise. There were adults trying to organize games and failing. There was a cake with 7 candles that was slightly lopsided because the great-granddaughter had insisted on helping to decorate it. When it came time to sing Happy Birthday, joined in. Her voice was strange and alien, and she did not know all the words. But she sang anyway, along with the humans who had gathered to celebrate a child who had existed for another year. The child blew out the candles. Everyone cheered. Felt tears on her face, something that almost never experienced. Wei noticed and reached out to touch her arm. "Are you all right?" she asked. Thought about how to explain what she was feeling. She thought about the 12,000 years of the consortium's history. She thought about the great silence and the forgotten joy and the long centuries when the galaxy had created perfect art that made no one feel anything. She thought about a survey ship stumbling upon Earth signals and a confused executive watching footage of humans gathering around burning pastries. "All those years ago," she said finally, "we thought we were licensing your entertainment formats. We did not understand what we were really doing." "What were you really doing?" asked Wei. Looked at the child, who was now covered in frosting and laughing with pure happiness. "You were teaching us how to be alive together," she said. Somewhere across the galaxy, on 17 different worlds, beings of crystal and cloud and living light were making wishes of their own. They were gathering with the ones they loved. They were singing songs and sharing food and marking the passage of time. They were celebrating. And in a small house on Earth, an old alien and an old human sat together on a porch, watching the stars come out, feeling grateful for everything that had brought them to this moment. The child came running out with a piece of cake for each of them. "Happy birthday to everyone," the child said, "because that was what you said when you wanted people to feel happy." And they did, they all did.